everyone. Good evening.
Good evening.
It's so good to see all your faces again. This is such a treat. Um, these pages were a lot heavier to me than the other ones, but one thing I kind of wanted to maybe just start off the conversation with was something I actually mentioned last week that came up in these pages as well, about like when Tia Josefa was kind of watching Mati grow and knowing that she was growing into such a great woman and that she was going to leave one day, and how that saddened her a bit. That also came up in these pages when Mati started feeling that about her daughter. So I kind of just wanted to start the conversation with like that kind of theme, that idea of like the mother. I don't even really know if it's a theme, but it's almost like the mother's pain of kind of releasing the daughter into the world after she's worked so hard to raise her. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts?
Like I say, I didn't read the book, but this is very connected to my heritage, cultural background. Like I'm from the Caribbean, so people from the Caribbean tend to keep the kids as long as they can. They don't release it. I would say from my own personal experience, I don't know what other people might think, into the world until the kids are not like ready to move on. I found that when I came to live in this country, it was like very normal to me in some sense that kids as young as 17, they are free to go into college and to kind of experience the world. That's not something that I ever experienced. In the art, we don't go outside. I mean, or at least when I was studying. People say loco, but here the kids go far away. And, I grew up with that mentality, even though I didn't follow that. I want my kids to go away, and one of them actually went away. But at the same time, having my son away from me, I had a sentiment that I always have to be like thinking if he's okay, like, if he's eating, if he's taking care of himself. I don't know. It's something like embedding our own growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's deeply cultural, right? Kind of even the very nuanced things, like these kind of family ties that she weaves into the book. It's subtle, but you can't miss it at the same time. There were a couple other people, I think. Does anyone else want to chime in?
It makes me think about wait, before that, hi everyone. So good to see y'all. It kind of connects it back to that initial point of their line where Fela was not able to mother her daughter in the way that she would have liked. And so it's like interesting to see that kind of like original sin almost play out in the different generations. And so that's kind of how I interpreted that moment.
And so and just to talk about, connect back to home, last week we talked about home, right? Like what would define home? Again, what would define motherhood? And in that same token, what would define mothering as well? Because I know, as I've stated several times, my mother was an immigrant from Honduras. So she had that old school way of wanting to keep her children under her skirt, as what my father used to accuse her of. And that's something that she had to let go, being in an American culture, because here, as you stated, 17, 18-year-olds were going away to college and hanging out with their friends, taking the train into the city and so forth. And this was a different experience from what she knew I think going back to Thea in the book, she was modern in that sense where she had to, it came to a point where she accepted that at some point she had to let go, as opposed to many, you know, old school Latina moms from back home who feel like they don't ever have to let go. You know, so I think she was ahead of her time in that sense, especially being in a repressed culture where everything that may have had some value to her was taken away from her. And you know, naturally we hold on to things that we do have when so much has been taken away from us. So it shows an evolution, an evolvement of mothering and womanhood. I think the way Thea was portrayed in that sense.
I also think we got to keep in mind that this is like post-slavery, not
right.
One of my criticisms of the book is it's hard to keep up with time. We don't know exactly which era things are happening in, and it almost feels like by the end of chapter 17, it's like contemporary, but it's really not. Generation by generation. So it is Fela, who's Fela's daughter?
Mati.
Mati. So now Mati's post-slave, if Fela was a slave, Mati is just like kind of post, right after slavery.
Right after slavery, right.
Concha, it feels like Concha is almost like now, you know, but it's real. This really must be the 1800s, early 1900s. So women are dramatically different, at least treated different than they are now, and their expectations would be different. I'm making certain assumptions, of course.
I mean, yes. I'm sorry. Did someone want to chime in?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yes, it's sometimes it's hard to kind of decipher what age or what year we're really kind of dealing with each of the chapters. But I would say, I think what's really true, at least what resonated with me, is the idea that mother-daughter relationship and how that can be a very tense and delicate relationship. I remember reading about Mati's relationship with Concha, and then Concha's relationship with Elena, how there was so much kind of, you know, the younger generation, or the daughter in each of those situations kind of trying to almost rebel and reject the older, you know, the mother and her traditions and her customs, and kind of trying to assert herself, like the daughter's trying to assert themselves in both of those relationships. So that really resonated with me, and it also brought up kind of my own feelings when it comes down to my mother as well. And it was really, really painful to read, you know, those chapters, because, you know, here I am also as a daughter. My mother is very Caribbean, extremely, so I would say. And, you know, she still believes that, you know, as a woman, if I'm not married, if I'm unwed, that I should be at home, that I should be living with her. And it was just, you know, I had to really kind of assert myself and assert my independent identity in order to live by myself. And I'm, you know, 30 something years old, and I still, you know, I still had to do that. So, and, you know, and then a lot of friction happened because I did that. A lot of kind of things, even talking to my mother right now, there's a lot of painful things that, you know, I can't say or verbalize. And I think also for her, there's, you know, a lot of things that she's even kind of very hesitant to verbalize with me because of my decision to live on my own. So I think even though it's hard to place, you know, this particular book in a certain time, it does, I think it cuts across a lot of different, it could be, you know, it could be now, it could be like 50 years ago. It really is real in that way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You know, in that sense, to Ron and Sarada's point, I know some other people wanna talk, and I'm gonna let you, but just really quickly to Ron and Sarada's point about the time being all over the place and like who's who, what's what, whose daughter came from where, and there's no numbers. There's no numbers mentioned.
There
like,
are.
In
There are.
the beginning of the book.
in the beginning, yeah.
No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
no. Let me tell you my take on it, if I may.
Yeah.
I mean,
The
just my
hurricane.
point is that I think it goes back to the idea of like not writing anything down. And she's kind of like using that theme in the narrative as well.
The oral history, oral
Mm.
tradition.
Yeah. But to me, the hurricane was the clincher. At that point,
Yeah.
I put my finger on when that happened, because I always remember my grandmother speaking about the great hurricane San Felipe el Segundo. And that happened in 1928. And that was devastating through the whole island. And so then from there, I kind of backtracked.
Okay.
Slavery was abolished in Puerto Rico in 1873. So even though we know that Mati was released from slavery before the whole island was released from slavery, it kind of like was almost at around the same time. So when you look at that, and when Mati dies at the hurricane of 1928, so that kind of like was my anchor, because I was also struggling with time. You know, how much time goes by. And so I couldn't really move on until I tackled that, and I researched the hurricane, and I said, that's the one that really devastated the Caribbean and Florida. It did a lot of damage at the time. So I felt a little more confident on where we were, especially when we're talking about Elena going to school, away to nursing school. Wow, that didn't happen until the 50s. But no, it must have happened a lot earlier, right?
Yeah. Tasha?
So hey everybody. So a couple of things to tie in with the time as well. I just feel like even if we're in a particular decade, the intermingling of generations always puts us a generation behind, a generation in the present, and some concept of the future, right? And so I'm thinking about my mom, who's currently my grandmother's caregiver. And so her past is very much the present, and it's 3 generations experiencing that all at the same time, right? So all of these relationships are coming into one space at one time. And in relation to what Sarada was saying, this chapter made me think about how I do disagree in that the 2 children were trying to distance themselves, because I feel like Elena was trying to stay connected to the ancestral practices, and then Concha was trying to keep her apart from that, right? She wanted, so Mati and Fela had that connection. The gift was theirs to share, but then Concha, once Chero left, it was like, damn this gift, right? And then Elena was trying to stay connected, and her mom was creating this roadblock, right? So there was this desire to stay connected because of something that was innate to her, but it was just making me think that how the different relationships and what could be the hindrance. So like my mom being the caregiver of my grandmother now in close proximity, it's bringing up things that they never discussed in the past, right? So now those relationships are coming up, but because I'm not privy to that experience, I can't relate in the same way. Like my grandmother is my grandmother. I only have a certain relationship with her. And you see how in some way the parent wants you to decide with them, even though that may not be the experience that you have with the grandparent, you know? So like I kind of resonated with Elena and like, hey, I want to be old with my grandmom, but in some way, in some fashion, may not to agree. It can vary depending on the relationship, but there's something that blocks that connection. And then unfortunately, when something happens, then there's this great, oh my God, I want my mom. after Mati just passes. So that's what I wanted to offer.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Someone else was going to chime in.
I wanted to echo Tasha's point about how this story and focusing on these different women and the different times that they occupy in their lives is placing us outside of how we normally understand time, which is linear. And so thinking about, I mean, it goes back to the conversation that Mati had with Elena on the porch, where she was saying that in having these stories, her spirit never dies. It continues on with each generation. And so thinking about that as kind of really challenging our conception of, you know, death, of life, of spirit, of time. And so kind of understanding this book as kind of laying out an alternative way of being in the world that is centered in a Black womanhood and a spiritual Black womanhood.
What do you, can you talk just a little bit more about that when you say it? I kind of just want to hear a little more of what you're talking about when you're talking about like Black, how different layers of Black womanhood.
Yeah.
And how they function in this world.
Yeah. So dominant notions of time are tied to capitalism, which is tied to patriarchy, tied to white supremacy. And so just seeing the existence of Black women actively resisting these modes of being and continuing to validate their lived experiences, seeing that as the kind of championing of a different way of being that's coming from their experiences.
Yeah, and so, yeah, does anyone want to talk about that before? Because that kind of brings me to the next kind of point on my list here, but if anyone would like to add anything, I'll mute my mic. No? So that kind of brings me to this idea of what do you all think about like this idea of like magic in the hood or like magic in the hacienda, like all of these women having these gifts. I don't even want to say magic because that sounds a little too wishy-washy. These gifts, and they are descendants of slaves, you know. And I often, so many times, I teach yoga at before social distancing, I taught yoga at a school in the Bronx, like way up Gun Hill Road, like bad neighborhood, you know. But the kids were so receptive to the practice and quite magical, actually. I mean, could get into any pose, like flexible, strong, handstands, headstands, like athleticism at its finest, you know. And I remember the last time I went, I just started to cry because it was just so magical. And I just knew some of these kids, you know, were not like really going to make it out of the hood if they didn't really have someone just supporting them, and they would try. So I kind of wanted to open it up in that sense, like these other ways of being as Black people, more specifically as Black women, raising children in this world, and how to kind of like, I don't know, maybe conjure up or kind of recognize that magic no matter where you are.
I had a similar feeling to that, of which, hi, my name is Marta. I'm usually at the other location. And I'm only gonna pop in for a little bit because I haven't finished it and I really like this book, and I've already heard a few bomb drops here and there. So I was like, here we go. This is why I didn't want to come in, but I wanted to say hi. But I had that very feeling in terms of magic. Hey, boo. In terms of magic, when I saw Beyonce's most recent thing on television, the thing that she did, Beyonce's at Coachella, What's the name of it? I don't know.
Homecoming.
Homecoming. Thank you so much. Yes. So I remember watching everyone, like the movement and like the energy. And I knew that that was something that could not be conjured in any other space than that of which they were in, because of who they were in terms of Black people. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to point that out, that I know exactly that feeling, that you're like, wow, this is like, you know how they say Black girl magic? Like, this is Black people magic here, you know? And I feel that in the book. Like, I really do.
Except for Concha. Concha's not having any parts of it.
Remember,
but
I'm
she
not at
had
that
it
part
at
of the
the
book,
beginning.
Ron.
She has
Stop
these.
dropping bombs, Ron.
Right, you can't jump in like in the middle of the conversation and expect us not to talk about nothing. But
Like, here we go. I'm leaving.
she has like these.
We're losing
She's connected. Well, I'm gonna try to speak vaguely for Marta, but she's somehow connected to the earth.
Yeah.
But she's not receptive to these gifts that she has.
Right.
So she's trying to mute those connections. And I don't know what happened with her, because early on, it seems like
He lost her daddy. That's what happened.
What
He
happened?
gone.
What
He
that?
left. She decided to like shy away from her powers when her dad left. Like in seeing that it was gonna pull away the people that she loved the most, she was like, she wants no parts of that. You know what I mean? Like the lack of understanding. Like, so there was the familiarity of what's going on. And remember, at some point, Mati was like, you can't come into this sacred thing. What was the word? Sancto, you know what I'm talking about? Like extremely sacred.
Sacrosanct.
Yeah, that word. You know, she kept limitations in order to honor what she was doing. So it was just like she had knowledge of something, didn't get full access to it, but then saw her father run from it afterwards. So she was like, I don't want no part of that. And she couldn't retreat. So that's when I feel like she made that conscious decision. All right, now I'm going to do away with this at this point.
But I thought she was struggling with her magic even before her father left. It seemed like she was being teased at school. Yeah. She was being ostracized by the other students because of her magic, and she just felt like an oddball. And I knew Chia was gonna leave. I knew it.
He didn't want to be there from the beginning.
I knew he wasn't. I saw it. I seen it. I think I dated a Chio, and I was like, I know that man is not gonna stick around. I knew.
You know, I have to say, and Ron, I'm sorry. I know you may be the only man here, but
all right, I can take it.
I can't believe no one else has mentioned it yet, but I gotta say, I think Concha's magic may have been, a little diluted because the man stayed around as long as he did, and the magic we have with our other ladies, they didn't have men in their lives. I'm just saying, like, oh my, this may be powerful.
Didn't Elena have her daddy Tito? Tono, what was his name? Antonio?
Before.
Yeah. But even Tono,
Tono was there.
He disappears for a little bit though.
Yeah, he did.
But he didn't disappear when Elena was born.
No, that's true. He was there.
He was there her entire life.
Yeah.
So
right, but I'm talking about everyone before Elena, right? Because we're talking about
but you didn't say that, Brenda. You didn't say that.
Concha reserves her gift for only intimate relationships with her husband. She doesn't share with anyone else.
Yeah.
And at that point, the fact that her daughter is confiding, is getting together with her mother, with the grandmother Mati, and Mati is sharing all these stories. It was the supernatural. Mati never had time for her daughter. She never had time for her husband. She never had time for her daughter. She didn't take the time to mentor her daughter and help her daughter understand the gift that she had.
Yeah.
She really, you know, kept her away. And Cheo, recognizing this, said, well, she's got to be educated in one way or another. And that's why he said she's going to school. And even there, she wasn't accepted. So she was rejected by her mother. Her father ran away. They made fun of her in school. So she, you know, this was not a gift for her. This was, in my eyes, it was a curse for her, but something that she was able to use only in the enjoyment of, with her husband, in her intimate moments.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get the sense so that Mati didn't have time for her daughter. There were like all of these moments where she was in the field with Concha. They're picking out herbs. She's trying to kind of help her. She kind of tells her that she shouldn't ignore her gift, that she should embrace it. There were so many moments where that was happening. So I was just getting the sense that because Concha's father left, that she kind of projected all of this anger that she had for her father leaving on Mati. Like her actual experience, what actually happened, the reality of the thing, was kind of covered, or it was influenced by her experience or assumptions of what happened, but that wasn't actually what happened. That her mother actually was there for her, was trying to kind of have her embrace her gifts. But yeah, Mati was just, not Mati, Concha was just upset. She was upset that her father left, and she blamed it on her mother.
And Fela, I mean, not Fela, Mati, this is as far as I read, but Mati, like, she had no direction in terms of her gifts, and very easily, took that up. And it was just like, I don't know, like we were talking about in terms of the generations, I don't know that, because I haven't read that far, but if the farther removed you are from the root, like the ancestral generation, if that makes that gift in you less prominent, because I know, like, Mati it was like nothing for her. Like, she just accepted it as a part of her being. So it's now that I'm hearing that Concha, which is apparently Mati's daughter, is almost rejecting her gift, like you said, Sarada, as a kind of like because my dad left because of this gift, right? If that's what you were saying. Like, I just think that she could have very well accepted it, just like her mother did. So why do you guys think she didn't accept it, other than her dad?
So I could add to that. I think another reason why Mati wasn't, I agree that Mati did what she felt was best, because she also entrusted the spirits to guide her. So just like you said, Mata, as far as, she didn't have like this guidance. She did have Tia in some particular way as like someone to, like a guardian of some sort. So like Tia was her guardian. She didn't really guide her in the gift, but she had that level of support. But I feel like with Mati, when she, especially with in the fields, when she saw how she took off her shoes and then the earth guided her to the right plants, and how she learned how she was always right, I think Mati had faith that the Orishas were going to teach her child in the way that she was taught her gift. You know what I mean? So like, she didn't have to intervene in the way that we would think that you'd have to be guided. She was like, oh no, Oshun has her and will take care of her. I just need to make sure that she knows that I'm here for her. Because he also talks about these proud moments that she had when she made the correlation. Like, how did you know you had the right plant? She's like, every time I guessed, and then I saw you picked it up, I knew I was right. And then that's what made me trust nature and trust the earth to guide me, and the spirits to guide me in the right way. So I don't think Mati felt that she needed to intervene in what was something spiritual in the first place.
I actually have a question. So Mati's gift is the knowing through her feet, right?
No,
But
that's
No.
Concha.
Concha. Yes, Concha. Thank you. He's mixing them up. But there were parts where I was confused, where it seems like she's shape-shifting. Like, how did people, those moments where it's like she's just like almost melding into the earth, or kind of like disintegrating, like how did people interpret those moments? It happens when she's at school, when she comes out of it and she's covered in leaves and covered in dirt, and then when she sees her mother at the end of the hurricane, she has kind of that moment again.
I do think there's something going on with her feet. I don't know if her whole body is shape-shifting, but there is something when her feet touch the ground, they almost become like organic. I don't want to say organic. I don't know what happens, but they really seem to have a deeper connection with the earth. And I don't know if her body is shifting in any way. They do describe her feet as being like almost like blocks. They're very, very wide, and they get into the dirt and things like that. But I don't know if she is like turning into a tree or anything like that.
I agree. I think I interpreted it as her feet being roots and her being rooted. Maybe some sort of like anxiety or just like coping mechanism. But thank you for asking that question. I was just really loving, I think some other people wanted to chime in. I'm really loving this conversation we're having, because that's what I'm talking about when I'm saying, like, when I'm talking about magic in the hood, and how, not saying that Mati was rich, but how Concha had it better than Mati did growing up, and how kind of like each generation has it the best, kind of the weaker their magic is. I don't know if I believe that, but that's kind of like what I see going on. Someone was going to say something else right before. No?
I do feel that those moments of connecting to the ground might be those occasions where she is connecting with her ancestors and receiving those stories. Because when it happened at the institute, or when she was hospitalized, it seems like that was the moment where she was having those kind of conversations and collecting all of the stories that up until that point she had been refusing. And there was something else that I wanted to acknowledge with what you had said, Brandon, but I totally forgot.
It'll come back to you.
It'll come back. But yes,
Hopefully.
exactly. Mati kind of used her magic all the time. Taylor kind of used her magic all the time. Concha seems to use it when she needs it.
But a long time goes by and she doesn't use it at all from the time she's a child until her mother. I haven't read all the way through chapter 17, but until her mother gets out of the hospital after the hurricane, which is she's in the mom. Concha is in the hospital for quite a long time, like at least 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah, 5 years. So that is a long period of time to go without using your quote unquote powers.
Well, she does use it in her intimate relationship with her husband,
Yeah.
as Evelyn said earlier.
Yeah.
I don't know. Was somebody gonna say something?
No, I'm just calling your name.
Oh, I don't know if you guys mentioned this because I came a little bit late. The conversation with Mati and Cheo around Concha going to school. That conversation, I was just hearing the divide. Like I could feel the tear happening, and how Mati was just, I I wanted to scream with her to be like, when she was talking about the books about place, like the books are gonna tell her place. Fuck that shit. I was literally screaming at the book. I was like, no, don't do it. You're sending her into colonialism. It's not right. I was like, don't do it. And it was just like, you just know that to be the compromise, right? And it was just like, damn it. And so it only just took one truth to rock the foundation of what she knew instinctually, but she couldn't articulate. When Chero was like, well, you know, you couldn't read those markings on those papers, and that's how they got you. It was like, no, damn it, no. I was like, no, keep fighting, just keep fighting. So like on that page, I think I highlighted like one line in particular. Hold on, I want to read this for you. I think it's on page, it's page 135, towards the bottom, when she goes, look, you can help her so she doesn't lose sight of her gift. She'll have 2 ways of knowing and 2 ways of living, all right? Mati, that's why we're here. We can help her find a way of walking both paths. And I feel like he genuinely felt that could be sustained, but it cannot. Not in the structures that have been built in the way that they have. You know what I mean? Like, something's going to die. And unfortunately, it's usually the deeper connection to the ancestral self. So I literally was screaming when I read this part. I was like, don't do it.
Yeah, me too.
But every generation does it. No matter what you think, every generation does it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. And that part was at the beginning, that I kind of felt that these pages were going to be a little more emotional labor to get through than the others, just from how thick that argument was about Monty going to school or not. And today, and I mean, I was siding with Mati, you know, I was like, no, don't send her to school, you know, don't do it, you know, she's going to lose everything and she's going to get picked on for being so different. And I mean, what are some of your thoughts, I guess, on that idea? I was talking to my boss about this a lot, actually. She her kids are in private school, and I just remember her saying something like, I don't know if this was the best decision. Like, I don't know, because our kids are having problems with school. It's a social thing, it's a cultural thing. And she's like, I don't know if I worked so hard to do this, now I don't know if I made the right decision. So that's actually something I kind of wanted to bring into the circle too, that idea of like, what do you have to lose to gain that intellectual freedom that we all kind of, not we all, but a lot of us strive.
I was thinking what Ron said about every generation does it. So I was thinking about how, at least in this country, you know, we're a country of immigrants, and every generation wants their children to assimilate more, to have more than they were able to have, you know, to have a better education. You know, it's just such a kind of a parallel. You know, my mother had a 6th grade education. My father, you know, dropped out of school at the end of junior high school, you know, so it's like, you know, met in a factory, you know, so it's like, what do they want for their kids? They wanted us to go to college. They wanted us to finish high school, go to college, you know, make a way in the world that they weren't able to, have more money, just have more. You know, I think that is true. Every generation wants. And what does it mean in this country? Maybe in another country it doesn't mean assimilation, but in this country it means assimilation. So giving up who you are, your roots, your people's roots.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna ask you that is almost basically like, how do you as a parent to make sure that your kids accomplish that? And, you know, again, I cannot speak for everybody, but for my background, I remember living in a very, very limited conditions back in my country. But they always wear pencils. They always wear notebooks. You know, once a year we get a pair of shoes because going to school wasn't a negotiation. You knew that you would go to school. You knew that you better bring good grade. There wasn't no recognition at all, like you doing well. It was expected of you that you would do the best you could in order to accomplish that. And, you know, I came back and lived here and I instilled the same values in my kids. Like, you know, no matter what, school was the priority. And I see that in other cultures as well. I used to work in a school where 65% of my students, they are from, I mean, they were, I don't work there anymore. They were from African background country. And you can name all the countries and it was the same philosophy, the same mindset. This parent never missed a day that they needed to be at school. Parent-teaching conference, they're always there. You send an email, they respond. It was like, culturally, you need me, I'm gonna be here. There wasn't like to think about it if you can. It was like, just reach out, I'm gonna be here. It was so important for them to be part of the kids' education and life, that it was so amazing.
But like, do we know?
What struck me about Cheo insistence on his daughter's education was that for that time, girls really didn't go to school, period. And so the fact that he was insisting on his daughter going to school was quite remarkable, because, you know, my mother didn't finish 3rd grade in Puerto Rico. At the time that she was growing up, there were no public high schools in Puerto Rico. The only way you went to high school was you went to a Catholic private school. And who had money for that? Who had money for food? So I'm thinking of, you know, how much I admired him saying that, because he was standing up for his daughter. If it was a son, okay, I could see, but this was a daughter. Women's place was not in school. You were home, you worked, you learned women's things. So at that point, you know, I wasn't so, I was rooting for Cheo because I wanted her to have the best of both worlds. I really saw it through his eyes. Now, the other thing I thought about in terms of the education of her going to school, they lived in a small town, you know, in a small area. Everybody knew everybody else. I didn't understand why the kids treated her the way they treated her when she went to school, because was she so isolated that, you know, that they didn't know that she was Mari's daughter? And they had, you know, things of la hija de la bruja, you know. So that was the other thing, that her gifts, Mati's gifts as a healer were appreciated. But on the other hand, where did she get those gifts from? She got it from the devil. She was a bruja, you know. So that double standard that was held in the community in terms of what Mati was and therefore what her daughter was, that was troubling for me too. And I had a hard time when I was reading that part. But they know her. They know who Mati was. They knew who Concha was. Why did they treat her that way? And it had to do with, you know, the connection with being a bruja.
Well, remember, they used to treat Mati that way too. They were like afraid of her even when she was born. That moment where she was in the bassinet on the table in the same spot that her mother was, and all of a sudden this, like, everything started falling. And it's like from that moment, they knew that something was up. So I feel like those are things that even for those that are not connected spiritually to anything, it's the vibrations are still there. Like you could feel like this person is either powerful or their spirit is strong. You know what I mean? It might have been that. It might have been that the kids around her, it's that bullying thing about La Bruja, right? But it's also that kind of kids, they kind of are very intuitive and they know like something's up. Like something's up. We don't know what it is and it's different. And what do you do when something is different? You make fun of it. You know, you
Exactly.
push it aside, you
Yeah.
know?
Exactly.
I want
Yes.
to add to Evelyn's point about the father and siding with him. I too wanted her, I didn't want her to go to school at that point because it was too soon, although I supported her getting an education. I wanted it to be where her spiritual gifts, where the things about her were built up within her, where she had enough confidence and understanding and comfort with who she was, that she would have been better able and better equipped. And I liken it to the Williams sisters, how their father made the decision not to allow them to participate in the junior tournaments because he knew what it would do to them. All that time he spent building them up, reinforcing them, honing their skills, and then they were released to the world with that strength. So for me, it would have been great if they had perhaps delayed the education and just built the skills she would need to combat the bully and the racism and just the ignorance of that time. So just,
Yeah, hello, hi. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I kind of, my initial question was, can both of these knowings, both of these knowledges exist? And I almost feel like they, you know, to go back to Tasha's point, I almost feel like they cannot, because one automatically negates the other, you know, especially when you think about, you know, in that time, and even, you know, if you go to any public school really, in America, it's a very kind of Eurocentric, you know, it's based on very Eurocentric ideals and values, and that, you know, tends to kind of side with the oppressors and the colonizers and the imperialists. So it's almost like, you know, and the stories of the people that are oppressed, the people that, you know, Concha represents, they have no, you know, they either don't exist or, you know, their identities are really, really stripped down to the bare minimum. So it's almost like they can't possibly exist because one would automatically negate the other one or discredit the other one, or it's just the erasure of this other self. So I don't know if she would have been better off going to school when she was older or younger, because eventually I think, you know, those ideals will catch up with her, and they would be, you know, they would, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? They would be internalized to the point where she would, you know, maybe forget herself. So I don't know.
that's a very good point, very interesting. But when I think of it, it is on the parents to instill and help build that and give their children that strength so that they will never lose touch with who they are, yet operate. You have to be present, you have to be a part of, at least for a while, in a system to understand and to circumvent the ways it could oppress you. So it's almost being crafty, being wise. You hold on to who you are, but you learn what you need to work and to benefit and to change the system from within. That's just one approach. I mean, some people would argue that's not possible, and that may not be, but I do think that some people can and have almost infiltrated, if you will, to get the knowledge and to get the things that will help propel their people forward, in addition to holding on to their culture, to who they are. It's very tough. Maybe some would argue impossible, but.
Right, and I
know quite a few PhDs, women with PhDs that are santeras.
Right.
Quite a few. So they've been able to do, you know, the best in both worlds.
Right. And I would say
they're very powerful women.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, this whole discussion, and I see your hand, Tasha, and then Pam. Just to add to this entire discussion, I do have to say that, remember, like, yes, you're right, Evelyn, like they were in that kind of small town and like they knew that was Mati's kid and they knew that was Cheo's kid, but like, Remember Cheo, if I remember correctly, Cheo wasn't really with the Bruja stuff at the beginning of the chapters we read previously. Remember, he kind of called Monty
He
out
broke his
for
leg.
feeling
Yes, she broke his-
so that idea, right, of like trying to have that dual citizenship in both worlds, existing in both worlds, that code switching, if you will. I agree with you and I hear you when you say it has to start at home. But remember, at home, Dad wasn't all the way 100% with it either. So maybe her loyalties also swayed to one parent or another. I just wanted to throw that in the circle. Tasha and then Pam.
I think that's a great point, Brendan, as far as like, you know, it's just double consciousness, right? And so like because when the word bruja was coming up, I was just like, wait a minute, is that a negative term at this point? Because now I was confused. I was like, bruja. I was like, yeah, you know, and I'm thinking in the contemporary context right now, everybody want to be a bruja, right? It's like, ooh, I got some crystals, I got some sage, bruja. So I'm just like, wait, this is now not a good thing. Like it's a derogatory component to the spirituality. So that made me have some pause. But then again, as I was reading, I was just thinking about my own experience being someone of Haitian descent, how that type of spirituality is also subjected to certain type of stigmatism within the diaspora cultures, right? So someone can do Santeria, and that's kind of like, oh, it's witchy, it's cool, it's witchy, but it's cool, but let you be someone of Haitian descent and it's voodoo, it's a problem. But then that gets recognized because of what was done. But that wasn't a conversation that was had in my house. You understand what I'm saying? It was immediately this acceptance of the stigmatization, voodoo, stay away from it, don't touch it, you know what I mean? It's wrong, wrong, wrong. But then how then can you be a proud Haitian if that's a part of your legacy? If that is the thing that incited a revolution that wasn't replicated, you know what I'm saying? How can you piecemeal certain parts? You get what I'm saying? So I feel like, yes, the home is a place for the grounding, but we also have to understand that when the entire outside is against that notion, choices are being made, right? And it's usually being made at the level of the parent as a means of safety for the child, right? So not having those conversations like, oh, I want to keep you safe. Oh, I don't want to talk about revolt. You know what I mean? Like, don't go against the grain. But when actuality, it's really just watering down this essence of something that keeps us tied to Africa. And it was making me think about, because I'm taking this class called Racialized Capitalism, and we're reading the book Black Marxism, and there's a conversation in how the intentional erasure of Africa and its impact in world history, as well as history, and also not telling us of what happened pre-slavery. You know what I'm saying? As slavery being the impetus of our existence. If those conversations are not had, then it's detrimental across the board. And right now we're in a system that doesn't give space for that. And then lastly, to talk about what Evelyn was saying, yes, there are people who are higher positions, PhDs, doctors, and at the top of their field across the board, but that also speaks to like this exceptionalism, right? We can't name a lot of them, we can only name a few. You know what I mean? Why aren't there way more people who practice these African traditional spiritualities, you know what I'm saying, in the masses so that it's accepted? That's intentional. You know what I mean? So like there's one of few, but were they able to express that throughout their whole journey to getting a PhD? Or is it that something that they can express now that they've already acquired it? So recognizing that people are also using that information when it's convenient to them when they've made certain strides.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thank you, Tasha. Thank you for that. That was fantastic. Pam?
Wow, there's so much, it's so rich. And I apologize, I'm behind in the reading, so I'm not up to Concha and that debate about whether she should go to school or not. But one thing I really love about the book is this strand of resistance that's there, and the resistance is expressed in various ways. So I mean, one, the connection to the Orishas in both Fela and Mati is an expression of their resistance, because yes, the oppression of those African religions in the Caribbean were part of the oppression of people of African descent. So for her to connect to that, and it's kind of subversive too, because Fela has that, and then it's kind of in the background, but it's imparted through her daughter. So it's like a subversive kind of resistance. And then Cheo's desire to read, once he gets sent to the capital, he discovers when he comes back and he tells Mati, I've learned to read, and this is how they keep records of stuff. This is how the slave owners keep track of everything and us. And it's also how they write down information. So I think for him, I mean, education in this racial capitalist society is both a tool of oppression, but it's also a tool of liberation if we take it and make it that. So I think, you know, it could be both. He could have kind of both, that his aspirations of being more bourgeois or something, but also it was an expression of his resistance. And I just lost my train of thought, so I'll stop there.
I mean, does anyone, that was a really profound thought. Does anyone have anything to add to that? What Pam just said about maybe kind of leaning into that desire to not claim your own piece of white supremacy. I've never said those words in a sentence out loud, but like, I think that's.
But isn't that what Cheo is trying to do?
Yeah.
Like when he wants to learn how to read and write and create contracts, he's really buying into this system that enslaved him. Like he's admiring, he's admiring the slave owners because they keep records of the slaves. You know, it's things like that. But he also sees progress in that. He also sees this as a tool that could benefit him. At least that's what he believes, that it could benefit him in the end. And that's why he's so insistent about his daughter going to school. You know, at the end of the day, he still believes that education is better than not having an education.
I mean, it's Ron, to me, it's almost to say that he believes, and I agree with everything you just said. It's almost to say to me, I'll take it a step further and say that it almost, he is saying when he says that, it's I want to be as close to those ways as possible. I want to be as close to those white ways.
He's always bragging on, you know, living in town and seeing free Black people and seeing how the white people treat Black people differently. You know, if you can make your way and earn some money, you know, he's really infatuated with that system.
And even, does anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, he's also very infatuated with white patriarchy too. Yeah. I'm gonna throw that out there as well.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah,
especially when he was and I hate to keep going back to this conversation because I know a lot of people haven't read it, but especially when he and Mati are having the argument about Kanja going to school or not. I think one of the lines literally was like, he didn't want to win this argument arbitrarily or something like that. Like he was gonna win, it was gonna happen, and it didn't matter what Mati had to say, but he wanted the argument. He was gonna let the argument happen. Yeah. I think
there were a number of times where he tried to assert himself as like man of the house, and you know, and even though the house, it wasn't even his, but
that bothered him.
And that he was, you know, supposed to be kind of like the person, that the rightful decision maker. There were so many moments where he did that, and you know, for me, that just kind of it kind of speaks to the own ways he was both obsessed and afflicted by white patriarchy. That the man is supposed to make the decision, the man is supposed to own, the man is supposed to possess, he's the rightful superior, and his inability to really, his intimidation, actually, I should say, he was intimidated by Mati from the get-go because she's just such a powerful woman. And then the house was her own. And his inability to really see Mati for like who she was, like the essence of her being, you know, how powerful she was, is what really kind of made their relationship the way it was. And I think it was really about him not really recognizing, you know, that he's with this woman, this very, very powerful woman, and he couldn't deal with it. He just couldn't deal with it. And that's why he eventually left.
But isn't that the sin of patriarchy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You buy into these roles, you know what I mean? Because with Cheryl, for me, I feel like I kept going back and forth along the lines of this patriarchy. Like, how much of the patriarchy was he consciously aware of, and how much was a societal thing, right? Because when he had mentioned that, because, you know, they had that long lost love, they loved each other from Timbuktu land. When he said the line about, and I couldn't find it off the top of my head, said the line about she had taken away his greatest dream in providing for her, I was like, damn, bro, I feel your pain a little bit, because society told you that's the only way you can show up as a man.
Right.
So not so much that he believed that was his manhood. You get what I'm saying? It was more so like there wasn't an alternative. You know what I mean? Because his intentions around, I want to give her the best thing. I want to give her a new life. I want to take away her trauma. I want to do all of these things. Those were pure-hearted, but the manifestation of that, I feel patriarchy boxes you in to how that shows up. And whether you're complicit or not with the ideology of patriarchy, you can't parse it out because it always looks the same. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I feel like if that line was not included in the passage, I would be 100% with you, Sarada. Like, okay, bro, your man rolls is out of control. But he really, it felt guttural. It felt like
it probably was.
Literally, huh?
It probably was guttural.
Yeah, it
this
felt
is a
like
deep-seated belief.
Yeah, it felt like you gave, I couldn't do anything. And what does that mean in the context even in now? Because we see it play out now, how people don't feel like they can provide and how it bleeds into how people have these relations. So.
And I actually felt bad for Teo. I mean, in chapter 12, when they were breaking up, I actually felt bad because what he truly I think what his intentions were and what he truly wants to say to Mati is that he wants to spend more time with her, that he, you know, he wants to be able to give her what she wants, but it just comes out in these very kind of strong patriarchal male posturing ways, and it just gets all fudged up. I mean, I think that's what robs, you know, their relationship of their closeness, because he's being influenced by all of this, you know, this outside garbage about what man and manhood is supposed to look like, which is very much influenced by his oppressors. I mean, I think one person brought up, where is he getting his cues about manhood from? He's getting it from the white men that he sees. Like, they're owning big houses. You know, everything in that house they possess, the people, the things, everything, you know, so he's getting all of those cues from, you know, what he's seeing, and he believes that that's what he should be, you know, aspiring to, but it doesn't, you know, it doesn't quite work out for him.
And of course, the whole theme of machismo, you know, that's very typical Latino. El macho de la casa, the machismo theme of it, of the role of the man in the house, what it is supposed to be. He wanted to be central. He wanted to be the center of Mati's life. And they even say that in that last paragraph. And he was peripheral. He was, you know, he wasn't the reason for her existence, and that's what he wanted to be, at least acknowledged that way. And then when she's, you know, at the, I think it was the last sentence of that chapter, she says, when he left a hole in her heart. And what was her heart? The center of her being. So he was the center of her life, but she couldn't articulate that to him in one way or another. It couldn't make him feel that way. So that was the bitter part for me, that, you know, he really had what he wanted. She just didn't tell him that. And that was rooted in that whole machismo, you know, and the role of women as being subordinate to the man.
You also have to remember that Mati throws at Chio about her owning the house. And I think that kind of like really kind of sends him off the deep end, because, you know, of everything that has happened, yeah, he's working hard and everything, but he could not even buy her a house to live in, that they are living in a house that she owns. And that kind of goes again to that whole machismo, masculinity issue, that he's from the very beginning, he didn't change much. You know, it seemed like it was a big sacrifice for him to come and live in that house from the very beginning, because he never wanted to do that. So he was kind of clear what type of guy he was from the beginning.
To be very honest, I feel like I don't know Cheo. I don't know Cheo. And I don't know Tonyo. Those two characters they don't feel as full as the women. And I think it's sad. It's sad that they've been reduced to a larger argument that the author is trying to make about society.
Well, you know, I'm glad you said that, because it goes back to my point that the men weren't really needed, you know, in this story. And I think that's why, sorry, Ron, again, but I think that's why they are so flat. You know, you can take them, you can leave them. You might know one of them. You might know, you've probably maybe never met a Cheo, though. I seen someone like in the comments that they dated a Cheo. You know what I'm saying? You can take them or leave them. They are in different characters. And I think that is because we are supposed to be focused on this divine feminine energy. And how, with having that energy, you almost can't have a man around. Or that's not what I want to say. It's just as tricky for me, because all of these women exhibit this, and back to kind of Evelyn's point too, it's a very cultural thing as well, right? There are a lot of social ties and cultural ties between these two genders in this house, but also it's a class thing, right? Because technically it is Mati's house, and she does throw that in his face, but technically Cheo does have, you know, like class-wise, he has more experience, right? He's been in the city a lot. He's made his own money. He's handled his own money. He can count. He can read and write. So if anything, I'll say this. I think that Mati actually is the one who's a bit sexist. I think she might think, and stay with me here, I think she might actually be the one who looks at Cheo as the weaker link. I don't know.
Remember,
I don't know.
There was a part in the book, I'm sorry, where she was like, when he comes back, and they reunite, they finally, I guess, consummate or something. They do something. And then he's like super excited, and he's telling her about writing, right? And he's like, yeah, because they take all their notes down, yeah. And she was like, I don't care. She was like, that's white people shit. You know, like she was like very clear that she did not care. She was like, that's not for me, you know. So when you say the comment about looking at Cheo almost like weak, right? Because she's like, you can't even be, you're not even into your spiritual self. So how you gonna talk to me about some numbers? Like, I don't care. And in terms of like the feminine vibe in the book, like I love that Fela, yes, although she was like violently raped, she came in there specifically with one task. She was like, I'm gonna find me this sperm to get this baby and I'm out, you know. And I love that, because she took that she took that ownership of her body back, you know. Yeah, so that's what I had to dump in there.
Can we just talk about the sensuality in this book? I just
Please.
feel like it just makes me so happy to see these levels of intimacy in this book. I ain't getting that out here in these TV shows, okay? So it's just like, don't be laughing at me, Sarada. I see you, okay? I see you laughing at me. No, but I'm just seriously, like, not only just the intimacy, but the intention behind intimacy. Like, I'm thinking about Emo and Fela, right? The writing of the messages with the stone and all these things, and how they put the stone in a, and even just like when where they hold the stone, like there's parts where they hold the stone in a place that's private and sacred, like the Yanni space. I'm just like, ooh. And then also when they talk about even when we talk about Concha and Tonio, just like the sharing this sacredness among each other, to me is just so. And then sharing that with Elena when she was younger, like cradling her with her feet. I just think these moments of intimacy are just as important to the conversation around the magic that we've brought up, because that is our part of our magic. This sensuality that has to constantly be put in question or suppressed very much is embodied in a way that's just so titillating. I just be like, I want to read the section again. I'm like, this is fantastic. This is just fantastic.
My favorite part was when they describe Fela's love, and he's big and he's like broad and his neck. I was like, can I have one of them? I'll take one of those. Thank you.
Twyla, did you have something to say?
Yes, I agree, guys. What Tasha was just describing, these are, to me, some of the most beautiful parts of the book. I mean, the thing that, like, oh, okay, this is why we're here. This is why to love, to share, to form those relationships that really defy descriptions, but the author has done that. So it's really quite beautiful. And one other thing, just to go back a little bit, talking about the male characters, them being flat, and I want to talk about the relationship that they have. Well, not the relationship so much, but the fact that the women are these great big characters. They've been gifted, and that is special. But most people do not possess those gifts, but there's still a symbiotic relationship between those who are special and gifted and display this magic and those who are basic, if you will. They need each other. Because if everyone is special, then it would not be recognized as such. So we have to value the people who don't just blow us away. I think that's important as a culture, because there's so many images and so many messages about who should get our time, our attention, our love. And there are all of these great big people, but there are people who do not tick those boxes, but are still worthy of it. So that's my 2 cents.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. I 100% agree, and I agree that why the how'd you do that, Cheyenne? How do you do that?
At the bottom, there are reactions, and you can give a thumbs up or some applause.
Oh, I don't think I have that. Maybe because I'm the host.
Oh, I have.
That's so cool. I agree with you, and I think that's why, right? These male characters fell flat, because we did need something to bounce off of, this feminine energy, if that was going to be the common thread, right, between all of them, which it seems like it was. We've got about 5 minutes, and I would like to kind of reserve it for anyone who wants to say something, a thought came back, or you just want to share.
I feel like Tonio just pops up on the porch, like he said, Concha comes back from the hospital and she is in a full-blown relationship with this man that we don't know. Like, we don't know him. Where he came from.
So after the hurricane, it seemed like 2 years passed before he even visits her in the hospital.
Yeah.
And then it's 5 years before Concha returns home. This is like a long period of time not to see your wife.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm saying that we're not needed. They weren't needed. We didn't we needed them. no, really, I wanted to discuss what you guys thought about that in the sense of complications in a crowded space when you're trying to heal. You know what I'm saying? When you're trying to heal, you kind of need the bare minimum, people around, energy around, so you can have that space for yourself to heal in whatever way you need to. So I think that was a reason maybe he was far away as well, so she could have that time, space, energy to heal without his interruptions, you know?
I think he was also pretty traumatized too by what happened. I mean, kind of going through the hurricane and then seeing his wife kind of really deteriorate in front of him. I think he needed that space and that time to also kind of gather and collect himself. And I kind of disagree. I think that there were definite levels to Tono. I think, you know, there was that moment where we had all of, you know, I thought it was a very, very kind of long, lengthy description of Concha like massaging his penis with her feet, that they had like this childhood relationship, the friendship that kind of grew into something kind of bigger. And then, you know, there was a moment where they're in the cellar and he like smacks her really hard.
And knocks her out.
Yeah, he knocks her out basically to stop her from going. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, even though he's kind of a silent character, I do get a lot from him, a lot about his character, a lot about, you know, what he has been willing to do for love. And he's the only male character that really seems to embrace his wife for her gifts. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think that I'm rooting for Tono.
He embraces those gifts as long as those gifts are subdued by Concha, like as long as it's just like a private sort of gift that brings him satisfaction. But he's not like how Mati or Fela was with their gifts. But Concha is not like kind of open and out with it, which seems to have led to issues with their relationships. And that's maybe why Tono is hanging around, because Concha is not out there, you know, all out bruja.
He ain't have his bruja shirt.
I don't want to throw this out at the end, but what really struck me about that time that she was away for 5 years, I don't know if the author stretched that point, because I don't recall Puerto Rico having psychiatric hospitals where you got put away for 5 years. That didn't exist. Maybe you got locked up in the back room in the house, but having her, in a psychiatric facility for so long was kind of far-fetched for me. And then having a doctor that was really, looking to reach her and taking the time to reach her, that just didn't seem to fit right with the time that I'm picturing this taking place. That's why for me, time was very important to figure out when was this working out. It certainly wasn't the 70s, because when they talked about the drugs, there were no drugs to treat psychiatric problems back in the day. You got lobotomized or you got put away. So just throwing that out there, that was the one part that really kind of struck me as not being consistent with the story.
Yeah, with the times, right? I completely agree. I actually highlighted that part, and I was like, oh, they had psychiatric wards? Interesting. I
thought that whole chapter was too long. At least the piece where she's in the psychiatric ward seemed too long. It could have been shortened.
But I really enjoyed these pages. Otherwise, I do agree with you, Evelyn. That was confusing. But otherwise, I really enjoyed these pages. I think it's 8:30, Ron. I'm not going to go over.
Well, end it naturally. You don't have to kick everybody out the house.
Hang up. You ain't got to go home. No, you are home.
I would like to Thank you for this wonderful conversation. I'm going to catch up so I can be up to the right pages for next week. And it's great. Thank you.
No, this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. This is always such a treat for myself. So I'll see you next week, same time, same place.
God willing.
Good night.
Good night.
Do we really have to go? No. We look so good.
Oh, please.
5 more minutes, Mom. 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes, Mom.
All right. See y'all next
Bye.
week.
See you next
Bye. Take care, everyone.
All right, thanks, you too.